Good morning, AFTA members. My name is Joanne Arancibia. I'm Head of Marketing at AFTA, and I'm very pleased that you have joined us on this morning's webinar. I have two very special guests with me. I have Satu and Minna from AirHelp. I'm not going to talk too much about AirHelp, but all I can say it's a company that has a very unique offering for travellers. And I think it's something that our members should know about because it will add benefit to their customers. And I'm not sure that many people, in fact, know what AirHelp does for consumers. And at the end of the webinar, I will share my story because AirHelp helped me last year when I was travelling overseas. This morning, you are all in listen-only mode, which means if you have a question, please use your question toolbox to write that, and at the very end of the webinar we will spend some time answering any questions that you may have. This webinar is being recorded, and like all our webinars we are going to put it on our AFTA website so that you can revisit it at any time or share it with colleagues who may have missed this morning's webinar. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass you over to the team and they're going to talk about AirHelp.
Thanks, Jo. So we'll talk about how AirHelp helps when your customers' flights don't go according to plan, and we'll do a general summary on different air passenger rights laws around the world. Just a quick background. So it's Minna here. My background is with Australia, and I've been in Australia for almost 30 years now, working with airlines for the last 20 years, 15 years with Qantas in various commercial roles, and then Virgin Alliances for 6 years. And I'll let Satu tell.
Yes, hello everyone. Great that you have joined this fabulous seminar, webinar that AFTA team runs here. My background is also 20 plus years in Australia, originally from Finland. And recently I was 6 years with Amadeus in marketing. And before that, I was a destination marketer, so some of you might remember I was marketing Finland and Denmark and a lot of the Scandinavian countries here for over 10 years. But now being with AirHelp about a year and a half and telling the AirHelp story also to industry and consumers.
So we'll start. So basically, just a quick summary. So we'll talk first a lot about air passenger rights and the legislation around the world and how these laws can affect your customers, and also the airline's responsibilities during and after disruption, and how you can provide additional help to your customers. And we'll, of course, give you a quick summary on how AirHelp helps with our compensation services. So to start off, basically, every year, 18% of all flights are disrupted one way or another. There's a 18 billion euro market in that every year, and that's possible because of the various laws that apply around the country. Now, there are specific air passenger rights laws in European Union, in Canada, in New Zealand of all places, and various other countries, not in Australia though. Also, 133 countries have ratified the Montreal Convention, which you might have heard about before, that governs international flights between member countries. So one of the important things to understand when we talk about air passenger rights and compensation with airline is whose fault the actual delay or disruption was, and it can be quite confusing. Basically, it's always divided into two. The fault is either within the airline's control or outside the airline's control. So reasons for airlines control are things like technical problems, crew issues, strike of the actual airline that's operating the flights, or problems that occurred on the previous flight. So the airlines, it is the airline's fault if their previous flight was disrupted. They're not allowed to use that as an out. Reasons that are outside of airlines' control are weather conditions, air traffic control, force majeure, political instability, terrorism, and things like in-flight medical emergencies. So these are the reasons where the airline doesn't have to compensate for the passengers. Also, airport strikes are within that reason. In Australia, so we'll go into the different countries now and what sort of laws apply around the world. So in Australia, the airline's disruption and customer care policies are published online. They form part of the airline's conditions of carriage. The Australian consumer law doesn't specify air passenger rights in detail. Montreal Convention governs most of the international flights from Australia. So basically the advice is that if you have a complaint about your airline or disruption, you are to contact the airline directly. And if this fails, you can take your complaint to the airline customer advocate, the ACA. And the ACA is funded by the Australian Airlines. It provides free independent complaint resolution process. But so there is no air passenger rights law as such, and there is no general compensation that the airlines have to provide. Just a quick sort of comparison of the Australian carrier policies. So once again, going within the airline control and outside airline control. So this is just a quick sort of disqualifier. So we basically summarized this based on information available online. So we don't really take any responsibility for this, but it's a quick summary. So the 4 Australian airlines, basically if the delay is within the airline's control, so it's an airline accountable delay, they will book you on the next available flight. All of the airlines, all airlines will refund your fare if they can't get you a suitable alternative flight. Qantas, Virgin and Jetstar will provide you meals and refreshments, Tiger not so, basically provide because of their product offering in general. And all of them will basically cover your accommodation costs. They will find you accommodation if you're out of your own home ports. They will provide you hotel accommodation. If you do it yourselves, there's limits to what they will pay for it. When it comes to outside airlines control, so then the airlines don't have to provide things like meals and refreshments. They don't have to provide a refund, but Qantas and Virgin do if they can't book you on suitable options. Jetstar and Tiger basically will give you a credit voucher. So there's just the different sort of, these are available on the airlines' websites. So I said in Australia, the airlines basically publish the policies because there is no generic policy that applies to everybody or law. In New Zealand, interestingly, there actually is a regulation that applies to civil aviation legislation, has a regulation for domestic flights. So any airline accountable, so if it's airlines falls for cancellations, overbookings and delays, the airlines have to compensate passengers, and you're basically entitled to claim up to 10 times the cost of the tickets or the actual cost of the delay, whichever is lower. So if you have spent money because of the delay, if you've had to book hotels, if you've lost money, you actually are able to claim up to 10 times the cost of your ticket. So this only applies to New Zealand domestic flights, but it is something that we don't have even for domestic flights over here. Now, European Union is really the most comprehensive, clear and specific consumer protection law that there is for airline passengers. The EC law, and we'll spend a bit of time on this. This is also the law that AirHelp mostly focuses on. So the European Union law is called the EC 261. It was established in 2004. It defines the rights of travelers who experience delays, cancellations, and denied boarding. Very importantly for us over here in Australia in particular, it also covers missed connections. So that law applies to every flight that starts in a European Union country. So whether it's on an EU carrier or a Middle Eastern carrier, Chinese carrier, whatever airline flying out of EU country, the law applies to, and it applies to every passenger on those flights. It also applies to flights that end in EU when you're on a European carrier. So if you're going, say, from Asia to London or to Frankfurt or to Helsinki, and you're on a European carrier, so you're on Finnair, BA, Lufthansa, that law also applies then. So just a quick summary of the law. Basically, there are 3 flat amounts of compensation payable to disrupted customers. depending on the length of the flight. So €250, €400 or €600 per passenger. These amounts apply to all classes of travel, so whether you're in economy, business or first, also whether you're a child or an adult, the same number applies, the same amount applies, and also regardless of what you actually paid for your travel, it's just those flat amounts of compensation. Now also the payment is, the compensation is paid to the traveler. It's not paid to the original form of payment, or in case it's corporate travel, it's not paid to the actual corporate, it's paid to the actual person who was traveling. And clearly, so it applies to airline accountable delays and disruptions only. So as an example here, when we talked about the transits, so if you're more than 3 hours delayed to your final destination, you're eligible for this, and the fault was the airline's fault, the disruption was the airline's fault, you're eligible for this compensation. And in the example there, so if the Paris to Singapore flight was delayed even just by an hour, but because of that hour you actually miss your connection in Singapore and you end up in Sydney more than 3 hours delayed, you're eligible for compensation. So often when you might have a small disruption out of your original flight and you miss your connection because of that. So the law looks at your delay at the final destination. So if you're more than 4 hours delayed and you're in Sydney, you're eligible for €600 compensation. Now those EC amounts apply to commercial overbookings as well. So if you're involuntarily denied boarding because of an oversale and you therefore end up delayed into your destination, you're eligible for those amounts. Also delays over 3 hours, as I said, due to airline controllable delays, and schedule changes very interestingly. So we'll talk about the schedule changes a little bit just after. Also cancellations within 14 days of departure that end up in delayed arrival. So regardless of this compensation, just a reminder that the airline still has these duty of care responsibilities during the travel, regardless of the compensation. They still have to provide your customer meals and refreshments. They still have to rebook them onto the next available flights, and they have to provide hotel accommodation and transfers during the travel. This compensation is really an after the travel issue. So when we talked about the schedule changes, this is quite interesting and a lot of people don't know about this. So if you have a if your flight has been schedule changed within 2 weeks of travel time, you're actually, and you end up arriving at the destination more than 2 or 4 hours out of your original schedule, you're actually also eligible for this compensation. So if your airline has made your schedule change 2 weeks before departure, you're not eligible for any compensation. If your schedule change happens within 7 to 13 days before departure and your new departure time is 2 hours out of the original scheduled time, and your new arrival time is more than 4 hours after the original scheduled times, or I should say, you're eligible for those same amounts of compensation. And if your schedule is changed within a week of departure time, and your departure time is more than 1 hour out of the scheduled time and arrival time more than 2 hours out of scheduled time, you're eligible for those same amounts as we talked about before, so the 250, 400 and 600 euro. Very hard to sort of find out these things yourself, so we actually will talk about how AirHelp does this all automatically for you. Now we talked about the EC law, so the EC law applies to all EU countries. There are also local versions of the EC law in those countries that are sort of bordering EC, so there are a lot of countries that have sort of adopted the EC specific law into their own laws. Interestingly, Canada has just a couple of months ago implemented their own very EC 261-like law. It's called the Air Passenger Protection Regulation. There are similar amounts of compensation payable for delays and denied boarding. So depending on how long your delay is, those amounts apply. Also, they actually have described different amounts for what they call large and small airlines. So the small airlines basically are small regional airlines, large airlines are any of our international airlines. Similarly, so if you're denied boarding, if the airline has oversold, they have to run a volunteer process to find volunteers first. And then if you have to be involuntarily offloaded, you have to be paid those amounts of money depending on how much later you actually arrive at your destination. So if you're bumped off a flight and you end up more than 9 hours later at your final destination, you are basically eligible for 2,400 Canadian dollars, which is about the same, I think, as Aussie dollars now. So it's not an insignificant amount of money. Just quickly there, nothing, that's just a lot of information, but just on the timeline. So the Canadian law was put into place just this July. Those compensation amounts only kick in from December, so they're not for the delays. The compensation doesn't apply yet, but will apply as of 15 December. So once again, AirHelp will actually process all these ones as they happen. I'll hand over to Satu. I'm running out of breath here now.
So now we're moving to Indonesia. Believe it or not, there is actually a similar law in Indonesia than in Europe. But however, it's for domestic flights only. And so if you are delayed 4+ hours, you can get compensation, but it's very small amount. It's about $30. There's also, they have a duty of care. So if in case you are denied boarding to overbooking, the airline is required to arrange convertible air transportation scheduled to arrive at the destination at the same time as your ticket with no additional charge. And if it's not possible, they are required to provide you refreshments, meals, hotel accommodation, and transfers, and so on. And then US. There are two different types of regulations in US. There's denied boarding due to oversales, and there's also tarmac delays. And these apply to all flights departing in US. So US Department of Transportation has regulations regarding the air travel, but it's not like EC 261. The main existing passenger rights are regarding denied boarding due to oversales and tarmac delays. There's also actually new law called Air Passenger Bill of Rights currently in Senate, and it's about compensation that will increase passengers' compensation, restricts high airline fees, and requires the refund of package fees or lost or delayed packages, among many other provisions. However, if this is ever going to go through, it requires, as we understand, a change of government and change of president. So likely with the current government and president, this will not go through. So, but what's this space? What's going to happen? So when it comes to tarmac delays, of course, you are all aware they're very common in US. For extended tarmac delays, airlines have to provide care to passengers that includes water, food, access to toilets, and medical care. And also they need to let the passengers out if the delay is over 3 hours. And when it comes to denied boarding and offload due to oversales, airlines must look for voluntary passengers for offload first, usually by offering compensation in the form of money or vouchers offering 5 points. But you might be aware the compensation can be negotiated. And if no voluntary passengers are not found, there are involuntary set amounts that apply then. Then we go to Brazil. And Brazil is actually one of the countries that AirHelp is also covering now. There are two regulations. There is ANAC Resolution 400, and there's also a consumer law. And the ANAC resolution covers delays of 4 hours. The airlines have to rebook on next available to fly to the same destination at any airline, or then refund the fees. And this applies to Brazilian domestic flights, and international flight with departure from Brazilian airport and arrival of Brazilian airports, and also connecting flights via Brazilian airports. Also, if your ticket was issued in Brazil, even if the flight is operated abroad and you faced some disruption issues with this flight, you might be entitled for compensation based on this ANAC resolution. And also, very interestingly, you can claim flights in the past up to 5 years back for domestic and 2 years back for international flights. And when it comes to the consumer law, you are also entitled to remuneration up to $1,300 compensation for moral damages, which is interesting. If your flight issue caused time wasted, you missed a business opportunity or suffered in any other way, you are entitled for compensation. Then Montreal Convention, which is a universal treaty that to govern airline liability around the world, and it's been adopted by over 130 countries around the world. And it's pretty much established airline liability in case of flight delay and for damage or loss of your packages or luggage. It's not so comprehensive on flight disruption as EC 261 regulation. However, it does offer rights to claim for damages for package, your luggage, and offers passengers rights on international flights between most of the 130 countries. It allows us to claim for following expenses that includes all extra transport and accommodation costs, alternative travel arrangements booked by passenger himself, also actually lost days of work or money lost for not being able to meet business commitments or any financial losses due to no-show and luggage issues. But you have to prove, you have to spend the money before you get the money. So it doesn't also allow us claim for lost opportunities, for example, where you can't show that your receipt. So you need to pay to get the money when it comes to Montreal Convention. And this is a map just shows you how the monies have been distributed around the world. As you can see here, the 18 billion is mainly, most of the monies are relating to the EC 261 compensation. So the issue is very much that, and why AirHelp was born is that based on a research and survey we did in Europe and in America, 80% of passengers don't have knowledge of any of these legislations. And even if they do, airlines often reject these claims. And also here in Australia and New Zealand, we are very aware that the travel industry is not, doesn't really know these legislations, and that's why we are here to try to share the knowledge that both industry and the consumers are aware of it. Just few words about AirHelp. AirHelp is world's #1 flight compensation company. AirHelp started in 2013, and today we have helped over 16 million air passengers to secure compensation from airlines. We operate over 30 countries, and we help travelers in 16 different languages. We have local legal experts in 30 plus countries, and today there are over 750 staff, mostly based in our headquarters in offices in Europe. We also take airlines to court. We actually have hundreds of thousands of cases that we have run through airlines, but out of these cases, our team has won 98%. So we're pretty spot on when it comes to knowing these legislations. We have two services and products that we offer for travelers and for travel industry. We have a post-travel service, it's called AirHelp, where it's based on receiving travel data from travel partners, and AirHelp finds eligible bookings, and we notify travel partners' customers for compensation. We operate no win, no fee policy, so we only charge a service fee for successful claims when we receive the payments from airlines, and then we share the commission from the service fee with partners, with our travel partners. This service, we mainly cover the EC261, also now Canada and Brazil. The other product we have is AirHelp Plus service, and it's a pre-travel insurance like product. Customers can purchase AirHelp Plus at time of booking, and it covers compensation processing for the whole itinerary. We recommended retail price is €5, and in this case, there's no service fee charged by AirHelp, and the customer will receive 100% of the airline compensation. And the travel partners that sell this product, they receive commission from this initial €5 sale. So the benefits for travelers is that when traveler, either they can come to directly our website, airhelp.com, or when we work with partners, we take care of all the collecting documents and preparing all the forms and communicating with the airline. And as I said, we don't charge any fees. We only get paid service fee if the claim is successful. For us, it's very important that we empower and we share the knowledge for travelers and travel industry that they have rights and they are eligible for this compensation around the world. And as I said, we also take care of legal proceedings in case of if the airlines refuse to pay the compensation. And with our travel partners, the benefits are really great because we offer the silver lining. It's that what you can do is surprise and delight your customers because they don't really expect this compensation. We also take care of all the customer inquiries for these disrupted flights. And if you partner with us, we share the commission. We share the commission out of the service fee from that data that you have, the flown data that you have shared with us, and we found those eligible bookings. So it's win-win together and delight your customers. You might have seen some press coverage. We last year partnered with Tramada. So any of you, if you are Tramada customers, you can get automated data extracts. You can subscribe that from Tramada, and the Tramada sends your flown data directly to AirHelp, and they don't actually charge. The fee that what they charge is very reasonable annually. So this is us here in Australia. So if you have any interest to work with us, partner with AirHelp, please get in touch with us. We're happy to help you to find the service which would fit your business, either from AirHelp Plus or the AirHelp service product. Also, you might have seen we actually finalists in the Travel Weekly Travel Awards, which is now end of November, so we're very excited to be finalists in the technology category. And now it's question time.
Great. While we do questions, I'm just going to jump back and keep your contact details on the screen so that people can write those down. Okay, I've got a couple of questions that I wrote down as we went through why people are writing their questions. Do you know when it comes to Brexit, I think there's lots of different policies that are coming into place 1 November. Will this legislation, the EC261, still apply for the UK?
So nobody knows what will happen
Yes,
with
okay.
Brexit, obviously, but what's happening, so as we showed, there are actually a lot of countries around EU that also have their own sort of copycat EC261 legislation.
Right.
The law will obviously apply to all flights that depart from the EU into UK.
Right.
But we don't really know anything for sure at this stage. But I mean, I can't see why UK wouldn't keep that law for their own use, because a lot of the UK airlines are quite the cause of this law in the first place. So, so we don't, as I said, we don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
But it is interesting, and we'll see what happens.
And my next question is, how you mentioned, Satu, that in Brazil you can actually claim up to 2 and 5 years, whether it's domestic or international. What about claims for those going into Europe? How long do you have to claim a flight?
To Europe from Brazil?
No.
Europe is, with AirHelp you can claim backwards historically 3 years.
Oh, wow.
But actually in different countries, there's a different rules in different countries.
Okay.
Some countries have even 7 years.
That's incredible.
Yes. So it changes. It kind of varies country to country. But we keep 3 years because of, in 3 years' time, most people will still remember and will have documents that they can actually show and remember that they were in proof that it was 3 years ago. So, but it varies. You know, if you have any flights that you think, you can go to airhelp.com website and check, give the details, and you can check. It's free service, and it gives you the details very quickly. So even though there would be more than 3 years, it's good to check if you have any flights that you think that maybe. So there's no fee for it, and it happens in a few minutes. But they actually find those flights, and they tell you if you're eligible or not.
Well, that's great, AFTA members. If you have a customer that complains of a delayed flight and that they've had a bad experience because of a result of it, as Satu just said, you can go to the AirHelp website, have a look for their flight, and then you can surprise and delight them by saying, well, because you were delayed, I'm going to help you go through AirHelp and get this compensation for flight. That's amazing.
Yep, exactly.
So I know that customers, when they're traveling, can lodge their own claim. Can you just recap how they would partner with you to lodge a claim on behalf of a customer? How would that work?
So airline partners, travel TMCs, OTAs can partner with AirHelp, and what we do basically is we take your flown data from our travel partners.
Right.
So you provide us either through Tramada or through your own back office system. You can provide us all your historical flown data, and we then go through that data and find the eligible bookings, and then we help you notify the customer with that email that was there, that their flight might have been was disrupted, and they can actually go and claim compensation through that.
And then if it's an eligible claim, you're saying that the money they get back, the commission that you would normally, the small commission that you take to manage that process, you share that with the travel agent.
Correct. So
that's incredible.
It's a commercial agreement. So we do one commercial agreement and one data agreement with the partners. So they have to sign an agreement. So we are GDPR compliant, and everything has to be signed before we start working with anyone, and also agree how we actually process the data.
Yeah, great.
So there's also, of course, issues with the providing personal information or not providing personal information. So we can work both ways, whatever the partner requires. So we can tailor-made it.
It's a really amazing service that you provide, and it's very unique.
Yes, it is, and it's basic. So what we do, just transparently also, so the commission, not the commission, the service fee that we take from, if customers go to airhelp.com directly and put your flight details in there, if we are successful in getting compensation from the airline for them, we take a 25% service fee out of the compensation. And when we deal with industry partners, so we get data from industry partners, find the eligible bookings, we take a 35% service fee from the compensation from the airline and share that then with the industry partners.
but in principle, it's always, first thing is always good wherever you are and whatever you do is to go to the airline directly and ask if the airline actually will pay the compensation, and then the customer will get it 100%. Our service is there in case of the airlines are on denial and they don't want to pay the compensation, then the partners can come to us and they don't need to do the work. So we help them for sure to get the compensation if it's possible, because of our massive data processing and our legal team know if it's relevant or not. So it's kind of like taking the hassle out of the applying for the compensation.
Joe, you can tell of your experience.
Yes, I have an experience. So it was August last year. Satu came in then to introduce the business AirHelp to the AFTA team. And it was, in fact, the next day I was flying out to Mallorca. And I wasn't in the meeting, but fortunately my colleague Belinda came out and said, oh my goodness, this is this amazing service that AirHelp provide. Then 48 hours later, I'm in the airport in Barcelona and my flight is more than 3 hours delayed. I think we arrived at something like 8 in the evening and we're meant to have 1 hour transfer, get on a flight across to Mallorca. At 1 a.m, my husband and I are lying on the benches, sleep deprived, waiting to get across to Mallorca. And I think, oh, I'm going to submit a claim through AirHelp. So my husband's sleeping. I sit up and I download the AirHelp app, which was extremely easy step-by-step guide. I downloaded the app and right there and then I submitted a claim to AirHelp, knowing that I would arrive at my destination more than 3 hours after the scheduled time. And I must say the process to submit the claim was extremely easy. The communication I received from AirHelp after submitting the claim was very clear. It took a few months, but throughout the entire process, I was constantly getting communication from AirHelp saying, your claim is being processed, this is where we're up in the process. AirHelp managed all the documentation and lodging that with the airlines to get the compensation. And in the end, because it was that short internal flight, both my husband and I were eligible for 250 euros back each, which I think with the commission, we still got something around 600 Australian dollars, which was more than the flights cost us in the first place. So I was a very happy customer and have become a huge advocate of AirHelp. And if it hadn't been for that meeting that Satu had with team, I would not have known about it. And being aware of it, when we were actually lining up to board the flight, I started looking around and I could see all this legislation on the wall and informing customers of their rights. But without being prompted, I would never have even noticed the sign. So I think many of your customers are probably like me, very naive, not informed about what our rights are. And it was certainly a silver lining for my trip after having to wait for 3 hours to get across to Mallorca. So huge advocate.
So it really depends on how fast you get the money is based on the airlines. Some airlines pay them very quickly. Some airlines take some time to pay back. And also, if we have to take the airline to court, then it can take months. Some cases can take up to 6 months. So it really varies.
Questions? Yes, I have some questions. So firstly, I just want to remind everyone that we have recorded the webinar. So the webinar recording and slides will be on the AFTA website, so you can view them there. Mayo has asked about cost of lodging a claim with AirHelp, and as the ladies have said, there is no cost of the lodging the claim. They take a small commission for managing that process.
Yes. Of the successful claim. So if the airline, when the airline ends up paying, that's when we take the fee. So there's no cost for the claim at all.
Someone just asked you to clarify what the €5 per traveller or per booking ticket.
So so we basically have two types of service. One is the sort of post-travel service, so after the travel pack, but you can also sell our service before travel. So it's like an insurance type product that you sell to your customer for €5. It covers their whole itinerary. It's €5 per person, covers their whole itinerary. So in case they have a disruption in their travel, we then process their whole claim and everything else without taking a service fee out of it. So they actually get the full compensation.
Right.
It's a bit more involved to the travel partner because they actually have to then push the itineraries to AirHelp. So when you actually make the booking, you actually have to then give us the itinerary, give us the customer's itinerary so we can then follow the customer's travel. And in case they have disruption, we will then process their claim compensation.
Right. So one is pre-deciding that you will be covered by AirHelp.
Yeah.
Which means that if you lodge the claim, they're not taking a commission, so it's only €5.
Yeah.
Or you can work with your customer after the fact when they've notified you that there has been a disruption, and you can process it then, but it's up to 35% that's taken from the final amount that's given back.
Correct.
Yeah.
But what we say is actually, so the post-travel, so working after the travel is the way that we start really operating with most of it, especially with the TMCs. So some of the OTAs, it's an easier process for the OTAs. Really, it's like a tick box in your booking process.
Yes, right.
For the AirHelp Plus, the €5 products. Whereas it's a bit more complex for the TMCs to provide that service because they have to provide us that data.
In advance.
Or any travel agent, if you are in a group, ideally we make contract the groups or brands and get just one big data from brands representing the whole group. We can also work with smaller individual agencies, but then we have a different kind of product or different way of working with the smaller agencies as well.
In a way, doing it in advance is a nice idea because once I've handed over the itineraries, you manage the process and you almost be like, oh, you've had a disruption. It's almost that surprise and delight.
Yeah.
We understand you've been affected and we're doing this before you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone's asked if they can refer clients to AirHelp without having a direct partnership with you.
Yes, they can just go to the airhelp.com website. So the website is there for anyone to go and they can check, put the information in, check if they're eligible, and everything is done through the online service. That's if they don't want to partner with AirHelp. So that's available to everyone. Yeah.
Some people may have missed the start of the webinar because I have a question around examples that are within airline control and outside airline control. So when this webinar goes online, guys, you can go back and look at those initial slides because it details those two elements, when something is in the airline control and when something isn't. Okay, I have a question from Anna, and she just wants to clarify Flights ex-Australia to Europe. She's asked, it can be any airline flying into and out of Europe that could be eligible for compensation, or does it have to be a European carrier?
Out of Europe, so flights that are coming out of Europe. So if the flight starts in a European Union country, everybody is under that law. Flights going into EU countries, only EU carriers.
So Lufthansa, Finnair, BA, currently all the EU carriers going in, but coming out any airline. Qantas, China Air, Etihad, anyone is covered.
Okay, very good. That's very extensive.
Yeah,
very extensive. Great law.
Yeah.
Now, for Stephanie, if you are wanting to claim, so if you're not wanting to go through AirHelp and you're wanting to claim directly, who would you contact within the airline?
The airline. The airline's customer care. All the airlines basically have their websites where there is a customer care. They have to have a contact.
Okay.
Every airline is different though, so there is actually no sort of uniform way of claiming with the airline. So you have to go to the operating airline and basically find on their website.
Yes. Okay.
So, but normally customer care.
Customer care. I'm just looking through some questions here. This is actually a really good question from Julie. She's asking if the fact that you have two separate tickets in and out into and out of Europe, does that connection matter?
Into and out of, so if it's a connecting flight, say in that example there, if it's a Europe, Singapore, Sydney, as long as that's in the one itinerary, that's a connection, as long as it's a transit.
Yeah, so it has to be the same PNR number.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have separate bookings going into Europe and out of Europe, that doesn't matter because you're just looking at that one continuous flight.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I think.
If you have a stopover, a stopover, basically only the flight until the stopover. So
it's in that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
if it's the same booking.
And a transit. Transit, not a stopover.
And it wouldn't matter if you fly one way with Emirates and then one way with Qantas. It doesn't matter because it's looking at that one.
Well, it's looking at that if you're going into Europe with Emirates and you're flying out of there with Qantas. So basically, your Australia to Europe flight with Emirates is one issue, and then the out with Qantas is another
issue.
One.
Perfect, answers that.
So the Emirates doesn't count because they're not a European airline into Europe, whereas the Qantas coming out of Europe counts because everybody is under that law.
Now we have some specific questions. What about countries outside those you mentioned? Other parts of South America. Is there any help for those?
So there can be laws, but we clearly didn't cover every country, but basically, so most countries have ratified the Montreal Convention, which means that all international flights between the Montreal Convention countries are covered by Montreal Convention, where those limits apply. So if you have spent money because of a disruption, and it was an airline accountable disruption, you can claim it back from the airline. But there are no, apart from Brazil, we don't know at this stage of any other countries, say in South America, that actually have a flat compensation amount, like the Canada one, like the EC one, like Indonesia. So there are those specific countries that have flat amounts of compensation payable, not just a refund of monies you've actually spent.
And I think the best advice would be to go and look at the AirHelp website. It's really clear and it explains where AirHelp's role is and what they and what countries they support.
Yeah, there's a lot of information on all the different countries and how to claim and what you can claim in different countries there.
Perfect. Question here just on that. Do you know if Middle Eastern carriers are covered under the Montreal Convention?
I believe they are.
Yes, I think over 130 countries around the globe. So it's pretty much
extensive, isn't it? Yeah.
It's very much just some smaller islands. Countries are not covered, but it's
you can Google basically which countries are covered, but it's all the major ones.
Oh, this is actually a good question about the way someone's paid for their ticket. Oh, so actually just rereading that question. AirHelp pay back actual amounts of money. It's not given in vouchers.
Correct. No, it's cash money, and it will be paid in the traveler's bank account directly. So whoever the claimer is, whoever sat on that plane, that the money goes to their bank account.
Perfect.
And it's in euros.
That's always nice when you convert it to Australian dollars.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I'm just looking through to make sure we haven't missed any of the key questions. All right, I think we've answered the questions that the bulk of the questions. So just a reminder, on the screen you've got Satu and Mina's contact details, and the webinar will be on the AFTA website. So you go to afta.com.au and you follow the navigation to events, and under that it has webinars, and all our webinars are listed there. So we will have this webinar recording, and if it's all right with the ladies, we'll have the slides as well, so you can download those and have a look, and we'll put up your contact details. Again, I encourage you to visit the AirHelp website because it's very clear. There's lots of information and it really easily explains what consumers' entitlements are. So thank you so much for attending today. It was very clear and really informative. And guys, I hope that you found or you learnt information that you weren't aware of before and can now better support your customers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo.
Thanks
Thank
very
you,
much.
everybody.